real. I mean, that's why I kind of was like, beyond everything, this is just an amazing kind of story that those of us who've lived it have gone through. So they showed you the graph, and then what?
Oh yeah, so they suggested something, and it was like of a comedy film. It was like of
What did they suggest?
Like,
Oh, okay, all right, something about.
Well, I mean, it was actually, it was almost as ridiculous as the years gone by, where this rep told me that I think she'd been told from higher up that a chromium factory or a chromium boat had leaked its contents into the River Tees. So our hospital is Teesside. It's on the side of the Tees. I kid you not. So they were trying to say, like, Dave, don't tell anyone, but but the reason why they've been exposed to high chromium in the drinking water. Right. Okay. Right. Well, I didn't actually buy that one, but and then 2 or 3 years later, when they're going, okay, well, come clean, then they start suggesting other ridiculous stuff, and I just had it. I was like, right, that is it. Proper drama. I was proper diva, proper drama. I was like, this is ridiculous. You never tell us the truth, this and that. And the outcome of that meeting was that the company got in touch with the hospital clinical director and said, we're not attending any more meetings if Dave comes along to them.
Because you were trying to let them know.
I mean, it's just like, you get to a point where, what's the point in these meetings? I mean, you're just talking, and then you just get these blank faces, and this kind of implicit suggestion that you're an idiot, and it just becomes ridiculous. So that reached a point, and then after that, it was just anger, I mean, it was like, there was just awful relationships between our set of people and theirs, and it was never, obviously there was never any interaction properly, because everybody realised then after then it was going to go legal, so they're not going to say anything. And actually up to that point it had been relatively useful, because what you could do is you could present your findings, and you could honestly see if there was a little twitch, you knew you were onto something. If you thought, all right, well, these types of patients we think this, we think that, and if they went, like that, you'd know, right, that's an avenue to go down, because you knew it might tally with what they'd seen behind the scenes. And then obviously, through the legal process, through the discovery, you get to read what they were thinking and what they knew at the time, and it's, oh man, it's all tying in, what you were saying, that's why you responded like that, that's what happened. And that was the first hit that went wrong. And then the pinnacle that you received, the problem starts to emerge with that, because that was a delayed problem compared to the previous hit. And I knew from straight on, there's never going to be any useful communication here. But I think one thing that really drives me nuts to this day now, will really upset me, is they try to say, we tried to liaise with the hospital and we tried to find out more about these patients, but they weren't, these guys weren't providing us with the clinical data. And I'm like, you could honestly read out emails where I've offered at my own expense to fly to Warsaw, Indiana, where their headquarters is, with these explanted devices and sit down and go through what's wrong with them. They ended up in block capitals, these emails. You've been through it now. You've been through a cycle of the reaction or non-reaction, and now you become confident in that what you're thinking is actually true. But it's a hell of a long time for somebody who starts looking at a problem to actually get the confidence up to then start believing what you're doing. Yeah. So you realise that previous issues throughout the world that might have, a surgeon might have had a feeling about, if you don't network and meet other people who've had the same problems, or you get out of that phase of thinking it's just you who's caused the problem, you won't connect the dots, and you won't have necessarily access to quite expensive equipment to look at these implants and really find the root cause for yourself. What will actually happen is, in most cases, surgeons will go to the company will say, we'll work together, we'll work the problem out. Now, there are incidents in the past now when you look back through the literature where you can see actually, that's what happened there. that's what's been published in the journal. I don't actually think that's what's happened, but if you notice that that product isn't used throughout the world anymore, you know, a lot of these things have silently died a death. And with the ASR and the Pinnacle, you're having this $1 billion litigation because, you know, it's more, you know, we're in the 21st century now, so these things do get discovered. But I think just because lawyers got hold of it, money talks and money makes people listen, and that's why it gets into the news.
Or doesn't. In this case, I've tried to get, you know, just the 510K, you know, my friends can't believe it. I tell 20 former colleagues that.
They can't believe it, can they? It's you know, it's people who are setting the views already. There's a big problem here in the fact that there are good lawyers and there are bad lawyers, just like there are good surgeons, bad surgeons, good people, bad people. There is an idea that people who are suing manufacturers or doctors are ambulance chasers, whatever. And I just wish that you could sit down, and it is so complicated, and it is so long, this process, but if you could see a historical, you know, the timeline of what was known when, how many things were sold, how much money is being made. I feel desperately sorry for patients who do go to litigation and they're accused of, you know, trying to make some money out of a situation. You know, if I was implanted with something that somebody knew was going to potentially put me at risk of a lot of problems, and they didn't tell me about it, you know, I'd be so angry. You know, I'd be like, I would want like someone's head on a block. Yeah. But if you do complain about these things, then you're painted as a nutcase, probably, you know, a lot of the time.
Right. It reminds me, when you were describing the way they respond, this parallels so much the patients, like you going to the company saying this is bad. We go to the doctors and say, we're not doing well. And they say, it's just you. And so for the first 5 years, you're like, well, maybe I'm just losing my mind. I've gone bipolar or something, you know, maybe nutrient deficiency. Same thing is happening.
Yeah, there's a really good parallel in medicine. It's chronic fatigue syndrome. And we haven't understood the condition, and it's what is called a dustbin diagnosis. As soon as you've ruled out causes, problems that are immediately going to kill you, so you haven't got cancer or whatever, you haven't got anemia, whatever, then you go, all right, we'll just label them chronic fatigue. And these patients suffer terribly, primarily because they've got no energy and they feel low, but the absolute killer blow for them is that they're going to the doctor and the doctor is saying that they're mad. Not necessarily mad, but depressed, or, you know, there's something in their head. And that's what then is just totally demoralizing. And it's that is an indication of what happens when conditions aren't fully understood. Rather than really go to town and investigate them, a lot of the time people get dismissed. And I think that is a parallel with the metal on metal issues, in terms of whether the patients feel sick in general, or whether they have these quite obvious local damage to the structures. That wasn't believed early on at all.
To ask Jody's question again, are all hips toxic in some way? Do they all shed?
Every implant that's put in the body will shed debris to some extent. So it's all about concentrations, and it's all about the different compounds have different levels of incurring problems, shall we say, or causing problems at different concentrations. So some things will cause problems at tiny levels, and then other things the body can tolerate extremely well at really high concentrations. I think there is some variability with metal on metal. You know, some people do seem to react to some extent more aggressively to metal at lower concentrations. But that variability isn't, I wouldn't say that's particularly large, given the fact that they're not, you know, the rates of metal complications with things like the ASR hip and Pinnacle are really quite high. So it's kind of against a genetic issue being the number one. I mean, it's just.
What do you think about the fact that you've been fighting this battle 10 years, you know, when I think that you were back in 2007, 2008, trying to come forward and say, we're seeing a problem, and yet I got them 4 years after that. It's like, wow.
I mean, I wouldn't couch it as fighting a battle.
Oh, you wouldn't say that? I mean, I feel like,
Maybe the ASR. The ASR, I guess. I mean, yeah, I guess the ASR was a battle because that was tough. Because when you know something really bad is going on in the world and no one's listening to you, but with your researchers, you're meant to be scientific, yeah. You at the end of the day, we were producing scientific material that we had the right to get passionate about, if you know what I mean. So it wasn't like we were going there going, man's a problem with everybody, you know. It was a case of, here is our mountain of blood metal ion data, patient outcomes, x-rays. We'd even started analysing the implants ourselves. We could wear map them, we could tell them exactly what was going on. That's when you have the right, if you say, to then sort of have the passion to have the battle, if you know what I mean. But then after that, actually, you know, and I was really struggling with it. I personally was, not as much as the patients. I mean, God, you know, that's primary here. You know, I don't want it to sound like God, weren't we suffering? It was frustration, I guess, then anger, and then utter resignation. I mean, for the last, I don't know, long time, I don't feel particularly. I don't feel anything about it anymore. You know, I feel terrible when I speak to people we didn't help. You know, we didn't. You know, convince people to stop using them earlier. Maybe, you know, that's troubling. But the only anger I have anymore now, and I have to say it's quite